everyone. Excited to have David, founder and CEO of Tenbound, with us today. Has over 20 years of experience, including leadership roles at companies like Infer, Glassdoor, OpenDNS. So, David out here is an expert in building top performing sales development teams and pipelines, right in our wheelhouse out here, right? So, his company Tenbound focuses on B2B sales pipeline and revenue through consulting, training, and events. And so, David, welcome. Would love to start with your journey at Tenbound. How did that whole thing come around?
Okay. Wow. Long winding road. So, how much time do we have on the webinar? So I had been running SDR teams and inside sales teams at tech companies here in Silicon Valley. And I was, looking for a job essentially, and it kind of in between things. And I got a consulting job with a CEO of a company who was a friend of mine. Actually, our kids went to the same swimming class, and he hired me, on a consulting basis to help with their SDR team. And so we created a playbook. We wrote the scripts. We set up all their sales tools. And this is going back, 7-8 years ago. And it just kind of grew from there. I got more gigs. People started to talk to each other. And at this time, a lot of companies were building their inside sales and their SDR team. And there was a lot of demand for expertise in the area. And so that was one side of the business that grew. And the other side was we started doing content and events, specifically focused on go-to-market and the sales development and marketing world. And we started doing conferences, virtual conferences, webinars like this, to really help the community to learn and to learn more about Tenbound at the same time. So that's been going on now for way too long. And why it's relevant, I think, to this conversation is we have seen the good and the bad and the ugly of go-to-market. And working with a lot of different companies, a lot of different tools, and understanding what works. And especially right now, in the last 18 months, as in the tech industry, there's been tremendous change, and the way that people go to market is completely different than just a few months ago. And so it's really important to adjust and change and to learn about what's working in order to grow. So I'm excited to talk about this.
No, awesome. This is great. David, you have so much of experience. We'll just spend this session on, like you said, lots of battle scars, lots of experience. In the recent times, what has changed and what is working, what is not working? Like, you've got so many clients, like you said, right? Like, just share with us stories. I think we'd love to hear the tools which are working, the motions which are working, and why, and which are not working, and how do you tweak it?
Yeah, and so I'll just, in the context of this conversation, we work with tech companies and almost exclusively with software companies, and so at a high level, there 2 years ago there was a lot of investment happening. There was it was like a go-go time of people getting investment and really focusing on growth at all costs. And the end response to that for a lot of companies was hiring a lot of people and for lack of a better word, throwing bodies at the problem without doing a lot of the pre-work in order to really understand what's going to work from a go-to-market perspective for their company, and especially with SDRs. That companies would get some funding or understand that they need to drive pipeline, and so they would hire a lot of SDRs all at the same time and sort of throw them into the mix and hope that they can produce pipeline on a regular basis. And it created a lot of opportunity for Tenbound as a company, to come in and help people to organize these teams and to optimize them. But when the economy started to go down and there wasn't as much investment happening and as much emphasis on go to market growth at all costs, companies all of a sudden had all these people on the payroll and switched almost overnight to efficiency at all costs. And suddenly you've got like a 10-person SDR team that is reduced down to one or something like that, or no SDRs, like massive layoffs. And so long-winded answer, but companies shifted from just hiring a bunch of people, giving them some tools and hoping for the best, to reducing the headcount to the point where one person has to produce the same amount of pipeline as 10 people.
Sure.
And so that's where we are right now.
Absolutely. And David, I would want to get into like specifics, saying, hey, companies we've worked with, like inbound motions, outbound motions, like can you walk us through some playbooks or what has worked? What are the changes which are being made, right? Something on those lines, saying, what are the motions you're seeing? Like, what about emails? What about calling? What about, LinkedIn? So
yeah.
What according to you is the landscape today? What is working in the GTM motions?
Yeah. And I know everybody tuned in to get the silver bullet. I don't have it. And honestly, it's I call this, we went through a period of the predictable revenue model, where, and I'm sure everybody on the call has read the book Predictable Revenue. It was the playbook for how Salesforce grew. That worked, 20 years ago. And the sort of the end game of the predictable revenue world was when this big shift happened in the tech industry. And now I call it the era of unpredictable revenue. Right. So it literally comes down to what is going to work specifically for your company, and being able to figure that out, specifically for you. And so the reason that I say this is, if you go on LinkedIn or you start to do some research, right now everyone's promoting their AI tool or a dialer. If you plug in this dialer, you can call 5 million people at the same time. Or, if you buy this data set, you're instantly going to grow your pipeline by 20,000%. It's not that easy, unfortunately. And we did get into a trap where we thought that if I just buy this one tool, everything's going to be fine. That's not how it works. Right. What you have to do instead is, it's sort of the capstone of the research that Tenbound does. We call it the hearer process, and I'll put a link in the show notes. Okay. And it's essentially, you have to apply the scientific method to figuring out your go-to-market motion. And if everybody knows what the scientific method, hopefully, I don't know, our education system isn't as great as it used to be, but essentially you have to apply this ancient, methodology of figuring out your go-to-market using the scientific method. And I can go into some of the details of that. Yeah, and if people are interested, but at a big picture, there's no silver bullet. You got to figure it out yourself. And we have a methodology for doing that.
Sure. And David, if the link will be great. And if you can talk a little about that methodology.
Yeah, let me
That'd
try to
be-
throw it in here. Command. There we go. I know that all of our raving fans are dying to get this information. There we go. Okay. I just
Right?
put it in the chat. So essentially, if you think about the scientific method, it's an ancient philosophy that can be applied, in it's essentially what's driven our civilization forward. And one day it just hit me. People come to me and they go, what do I do? Do I do I use AI? Do I do personalization? Should I cold call? Should I, go to conferences? Like, what's the best way? And finally, it's like, look, I sure, you can pay me a lot of money and I'll give you the magic bullet, but instead you unfortunately have to do the really, really hard work of figuring out your go-to-market motion. And so essentially, you think of it in a 90-day sprint. This is going to be a 90-day sprint, all hands on deck. So we're going to include the CEO, we're going to include marketing, we're going to include sales development, we're going to include sales, and form a tiger team. And essentially, we're going to make a hypothesis. We think that our, ideal customer profile and persona is, tech companies with 100 employees, and they've got 10 salespeople. That's essentially our hypothesis. Okay, so the experiment is going to be, we're going to rip a list. We're going to get their name and phone numbers, and we're going to call all of them for 5 times for the next 3 months. Okay. Once we have a data set based on the information that we've collected, then we're going to analyze the results and understand what's working, what's not, who's doing the job, who's not, who's good at this, who's not, etc. And if we're getting any traction whatsoever, then we're going to report those results up to, if you're a smaller company, the CEO, and say, okay, here's what we did. Here's the tools that we used. Here's the, positive or negative result. And here's the learnings that came out of that campaign. Once we have that, then we go back to the drawing board, erase the whiteboard, take the learnings from that campaign, use the best part of it, bring in some new ideas, go back up to the hypothesis stage, reset the clock to 90 days, and do it again. And do it and do it and do it and do it again and again for the rest of your life. Because that's how we have to stay nimble and be able to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Right. And I opened the link out here, David. So there's this here our model.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this is basically you're saying it's hypothesize, experiment, analyze the results, report on the results, examine and research further, and then repeat. So this is what you're saying. This here our model is what you do every 90 days.
Yeah, exactly. And so, everybody's bored with project management. And unfortunately, the bad news for everybody on the call is to be really great at especially sales development. But bigger picture, anything go to market, you have to be an amazing project manager and be able to manage cross-functionally across the go-to-market team, potentially with people that don't even report to you. And that's one of the biggest challenges for SDR leaders that are trying to drive consistent revenue and pipeline and revenue for their company, because they don't necessarily, they can't tell people what to do. you know, and they have to work internally to drive the tiger team that's working to implement this. And so there's a lot. So I would recommend, if you can, that the CEO is really the final, influencer on making sure that you're doing this on a consistent basis, and then they give their blessing to the go-to-market team to say, this is how we're going to figure out how to drive consistent pipeline and revenue.
Right. And David, like you do a lot of these events and trainings. Uh, how do you hire and train a good SDR to be effective in today's market?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, don't go in for the stereotypes.
Right.
That's what I would say. When you're looking for SDRs, they don't have to be there's a stereotype that you want the Division 1 ex athlete who, washed out because their knee, was injured or something like that, and now they're getting into the business world. That those might be great people, and they might be able to do a great job for you. But I would open up your aperture in hiring SDRs as wide as you can, because you never know what that diverse background might bring, to be able to really nail your go-to-market motion. The other thing is that I always recommend that you look for some sales experience in their background. Have they ever sold anything? Even if it's Girl Scout cookies or Cutco knives, or something where they had to go out and get rejected on a
Right.
daily basis in order to make their number. Best case scenario, some of the best SDRs I ever hired were from a commission only college painting company, where one of the SDRs knew a lot of the alumni and he introduced us to them. They were amazing, especially the ones who worked on a commission only basis in college and were able to achieve President's Club. I mean, think about the initiative and focus and determination that it takes to do that. That could be a great SDR.
Right. And now with AI coming in, how do you see the landscape evolving?
Yeah, I mean, so AI, you can think about it two ways. I mean, there's billions of ways, but there's two ways that are relevant probably to this conversation,
Yeah.
is process and content. So there's been a lot of emphasis toward content, with the generative AI that's come out, where, hey, you can use this to personalize your emails and personalize your script and write blog posts and things like that. That's great, but I think most people on the receiving end of a lot of the content that's produced by AI can tell that it's AI pretty quickly, and you kind of lose credibility with the prospects if you're using it in that way. I recommend you look at AI from a process perspective. And so, are there uh, pieces of your process on a daily basis that could potentially be accelerated by applying AI? And so, I'll give you an example. If you've got to have 5 different tabs open in order, first you go to Salesforce, and then you go to Sprouts, and then you go to Zoom Info, and then you go to, Orem, and you've got all these different things. What part of that process could be accelerated by using AI, and applying some of the tools to that process?
Sure.
That's more of how I would look at it for go to market.
Right. Any tools, David, which you have played with and you like?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few of these, but something that has been making a lot of noise lately in LinkedIn is the RB2B of
Yeah.
the world. And also a friend of mine runs a company called Quanzu that does this.
Yeah.
And it essentially, it's a piece of code that sits on your website and triangulates. Not only can you see the company of someone who's looking at your website, but they can also take a wild guess at who that person might be.
Yeah.
And so, for example, if you're on my website right now, um, there's about a 50-50 chance, but it could potentially tell me that it's you right now that's on my website. And it's a little bit scary in some ways, and I don't know if it's legal or not, but it's very, very interesting from just a research perspective.
Yeah.
Um, as an example, Tenbound has a directory of sales tools that's posted on our website. We've got over 2,000 tools. And for me, I was wondering, which of the pages gets the most hits and who's the most interested in. And it turns out that the most interested people that we get in Tenbound is investors.
Right.
Investors or and associates who work at VCs and PEs, they're
Sure.
coming to Tenbound to do research on the companies.
Yeah.
And so that opened up, now I can go back to the hearer model and say, hey, maybe there's a line of business here that I wasn't even thinking about. Let's make a package, a research package for investment associates at these companies, at these investment houses. So that was really interesting and a powerful tool.
Right. Awesome. So David, like, if you were talking about training and stuff, what do you do in that training? Like, is it the here our model? Like, when you sign up with a customer, what are the things you analyze? What is the audit you do? What are the changes you try and bring?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's a really good. So it depends. So if somebody just calls me and they're like, "Hey, I want to train, 10 SDRs at my company," then we have just a set package. It's laid out in my book, which everybody should buy. I don't know if you could see it.
Yeah.
Um, we have a set package that we just roll out for them, and that might just be a call with the SDR manager and just aligning on what they're trying to achieve. We also have online training that they can just purchase per seat at Tenbound. But to your question, the more fun and interesting projects is when they come and they're like, hey, our pipeline is running dry. We don't really know what to do. We've got a lot of marketing programs happening. We've got SDRs, but it's just sort of flatlined. In that case, it's much more fun because we can really come in and open up the hood and do like a 12-point inspection on the whole go-to-market, continuum. And usually there's 3 or 4 things that come out that can be improved and worked on. They have to do with people, processes, and the technology stack. So with any one of those 3, you can double click on and find probably 10 problems that need to be fixed at the company.
Right.
And we can pull that out, put it into a game plan, work on it for 3 to 6 months, and then they come out at the end and they're a happy customer for Tenbound. So
Got it. Got it. And can you talk about some of these challenges in people or technologies or the buckets?
yeah.
Like, what are some of the top challenges you have seen across companies?
Yeah, okay. So we'll start with people. That's usually they've got great people. They're working really, really hard. Some people might not be, right for sales, or they've got like one foot out the door and they're looking for a different job, and they're not really into it anymore. And sales development is sales, so it's a numbers game. And so if there's a bell curve usually of performance, and some people want to get better and they want to improve and they're really into it still. some people are just halfway out the door, and they're not interested in it. They're just collecting a paycheck. And so you can identify that. Sometimes it's good to have an outside party come in and go, hey, I mean, I know that if you're in the weeds every day, it's sometimes hard to see like pretty basic things. And then also, what's the onboarding program for the team? What's the training program? How are you coaching them? Are you working with them on a daily basis? A lot of people just hire SDRs and inside salespeople, and they just leave them, especially if they're working from home. There's nobody paying attention and training or coaching them, and that usually comes out pretty quickly. So people, there's a ton of work to do there. Process, it's like what we were talking about. If you're spending all day researching and reading and trying to triangulate information, you're wasting a ton of time, because as a salesperson, the only valuable time really that you have is talking to either prospects and customers, having meetings, pushing deals forward, and closing deals. So anything that's taking you away from that is wasted time. Mm-hmm. Technology, there's this thing called a Frankenstack, where it's like Frankenstein of a tech stack. And there's a lot of work to do there, because there could be tools that you don't use, that nobody's using the licenses. You got a bad deal, you signed a bad contract, you got to rip them out, you got to replace them, you got to buy Sprouts and put it in instead. Right? It's that the tech stack is usually a mess. And so, hey, there's a lot of work to do. And it's not like anybody's doing a bad job or they're not trying to succeed. It's just that as a consultant, it's way easier for me to come in I just swoop in, and I see all these obvious problems that need to be fixed. And if you're working there at a company, you're just in it every day, and you just sort of accept it. So that's the value of bringing in a consultant.
Right. And David, like, how do you get adoption around it? It's easy to come and give advice, but how do you make sure that companies own it and actually follow that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question for any advisory type of service. If you come back 6 months later, are they still implementing everything, and are they still getting value from the advice and the playbook that you gave them? And it's tricky. I mean, it's really it's up to them. And this is why consulting is like a billion-trillion-dollar industry, because they come in, identify problems, help right the ship, and add a lot of value. And then at some point, it's like, hey, we don't need this anymore. We're good. And they go away. And then, inevitably, new people come in, new processes, new technologies, et cetera, and the companies are back in the same problem that they were, a year ago. And if the consultant company did a good job, then the guy's going to call back and put him back in. And that's like with Tenbound, I don't do any outbound prospecting. It's all just people that I've worked with in the past, and they end up in a new company, and they're like, hey, could you come and help us out? I'm like, sure.
No, awesome. We are at time. David, it was a pleasure talking to you. Yeah. And look forward to keeping in touch.